Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, An Invitation and a Storm. Hercule Poirot was enjoying a rare moment of quiet in his London flat, seated comfortably in his favourite armchair with a small cup of meticulously prepared coffee, when the postman delivered a single, cream-coloured envelope. Poirot, with his characteristic precision, examined the envelope first. The handwriting was thin, elegant, and deliberate. He turned it over in his hands, noting the unusual slant of the letters and the careful spacing between words. His moustaches twitched, a sure sign that intrigue had arrived at his door. With deliberate care, Poirot broke the seal and read the brief, urgent message. Monsieur Poirot, I implore you to come to Wetherby Grange at once. My family is in grave distress, and I fear something dreadful may occur. I cannot say more in writing. Yours sincerely, Clara Fenwick. Poirot's grey eyes narrowed slightly behind his spectacles. Clara Fenwick, he had met her once at a small dinner in Mayfair. A young woman of quiet intelligence, soft-spoken yet observant, she had impressed him with her clarity of thought and discretion. For her to write such a letter, laced with veiled fear, suggested a situation serious enough to disturb even the calmest household. He did not hesitate. In half an hour, his coat was buttoned, his hat set at a rakish yet precise angle, and he was aboard a motorcar heading westward out of London. The rain fell in unrelenting sheets, drumming against the windshield, while the wind howled in mournful gusts that made the trees along the roadside bow and shiver. Poirot leaned back, observing the storm with an expression of mild curiosity. He did not consider weather a hindrance, it merely made the human drama he was about to encounter all the more atmospheric. By evening, the motorcar turned off the main road and ascended a winding, muddy track. The vehicle emerged from the shadows of tall trees to reveal Wetherby Grange, a sprawling stone manor perched atop a hill, its dark silhouette outlined against the grey sky. Rain streamed down its walls, and the wind bent the long, skeletal branches of the surrounding trees. Fog hugged the grounds, curling in wisps across the gravel driveway, giving the estate an almost ethereal, haunted appearance. Poirot stepped from the car, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the wet gravel. Clara Fenwick came running to meet him, her bonnet dishevelled, cheeks flushed from the wind and exertion. She was clearly relieved to see him. Monsieur Poirot. You came, she exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. Mais oui, mademoiselle, Poirot said gently, offering her a calm, reassuring smile. But tell me, why do I see such distress upon your face? Clara took a deep breath, glancing nervously over her shoulder at the imposing manor. It is my uncle, Sir Giles Wetherby. Something is terribly wrong. Strange things have been happening in the house, things I cannot explain, and now I fear for his safety. Poirot inclined his head, noting the subtle signs of unease in her posture, the way she clutched her coat tightly, the slight quiver in her hands, the restless glance toward the manor's looming doors. Inside, the household was already on edge. Sir Giles Wetherby, a stern man of considerable age, had been pacing the drawing-room when Poirot arrived. His brow was furrowed, his hands twitching with irritation. A fire burned fitfully in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. The furniture was heavy and imposing, polished to a dull sheen, while thick curtains blocked much of the waning light. Everything suggested wealth, power, and authority, but also a certain coldness that made Poirot's small hairs on the back of his neck prickle. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, Sir Giles said curtly, extending a hand with restrained politeness. I suppose you received my niece's letter. Indeed, sir, Poirot replied, bowing slightly. She writes with a sense of urgency. Please, tell me in your own words why I am summoned on such a stormy evening. Sir Giles's lips pressed into a thin line. There have been disturbances, strange occurrences in the house. Whispers outside my study door, missing documents, shadows moving where no one should be. I cannot explain it, but I am convinced someone in this house wishes me harm. Poirot's eyes flicked across the room, taking in each face, each subtle gesture, and each twitch of unease. He noted Clara standing near her uncle, her hands clasped tightly before her, Martin, her cousin, a lean, restless man with eyes that darted nervously from corner to corner, Diana, Martin's wife, tall and elegant, her expression composed yet strangely distant, Mrs. Price, the housekeeper, whose stern demeanour suggested both authority and secrecy, and Alan Brooke, the mild-mannered secretary, whose pallor and shuffling manner suggested discomfort in the presence of tension. Even the doctor, Edward Rowley, seemed oddly cheerful for a household under threat, an observation Poirot filed carefully in his mental catalogue. Something in this house, Monsieur, Sir Giles continued, is deeply wrong. And now, with this storm, I fear the worst. You must help us. Poirot's moustaches twitched, an involuntary sign of anticipation. He was not a man easily ruffled, yet he relished the opportunity to unravel human complexity, the interplay of motives, and the dance of deceit. As night fell, the storm outside intensified. Rain battered the windows and wind moaned like a creature in pain. Thunder rolled in the distance, shaking the foundations of the old manor. Poirot, having requested a tour of the main rooms, moved methodically through the house, noting details invisible to most, a brass paperweight slightly askew on the mantelpiece, footprints dampening the polished floor, the faint scent of a peculiar perfume that seemed out of place in such a setting. Each observation was catalogued with meticulous care, for Poirot knew that the smallest detail could reveal the largest truth. Later, as he stood in the dimly lit corridor, listening to the storm, a sudden, piercing cry shattered the tense quiet. Poirot's heart remained calm, but his mind, ever alert, leapt into focus. Rushing toward the sound, he found the household gathered outside the east wing. There, slumped beside a desk in a study that smelled faintly of paper and smoke, lay Sir Giles Wetherby. His eyes were closed, his hands limp, and his body oddly still. Poirot knelt beside him, feeling for signs of life. A chill ran down his spine. It was clear that the evening, which had begun with whispered fears and uneasy glances, had escalated into something far graver. As the storm raged on, Hercule Poirot, master of order and reason, straightened himself. His sharp eyes took in every trembling figure, every anxious face, every small clue scattered across the study. The game had begun, and he alone possessed the mind and method to unravel the mystery that was about to consume Wetherby Grange. Patience, patience, mon Dieu, Poirot whispered softly to himself, moustaches twitching. The truth, it will reveal itself, but only to those who know how to see. Chapter 2, The Room of Questions. The following morning, Wetherby Grange was wrapped in a grey drizzle, the storm having abated only slightly. A soft mist clung to the eaves and lawns, and the wind still moaned along the corridors of the vast house. Hercule Poirot, having taken his breakfast with the precise attention to ritual that he always demanded, began the meticulous work of investigation. He knew that in a household gripped by fear, appearances could be deceiving, and he had learned long ago that truth often hid behind ordinary gestures. Sir Giles Wetherby's study had been carefully secured for the night, yet Poirot's keen eyes noted subtle anomalies the others had missed. The body had been removed by the local doctor, Edward Rowley, and the servants, but the scene left traces, almost like footprints in a snowdrift, the angle of the desk, a displaced chair, the faint smudge of fingerprints on the window latch. Poirot crouched and examined the floor closely. There were small scuff marks near the fireplace, as if someone had been standing there with deliberate intent. Ah, mon Dieu, Poirot murmured to himself, fingers steepled. It is never as simple as it appears. He began by questioning the household individually, starting with Clara Fenwick, who had spent a restless night in a guest room not far from the study. She greeted Poirot with a mixture of relief and nervous apprehension. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I cannot imagine who would want to harm my uncle. He is strict, but he has done nothing to provoke anyone." Poirot tilted his head slightly. "Mademoiselle, one must not always look to provocation. Sometimes, malice grows in silence, like a hidden vine, spreading unseen until it strangles the heart. Tell me, who was in the house last evening?" "Each visitor, each servant, each observer." Clara recited the household roster with care: a Martin Fenwick, her cousin, Diana Fenwick, his wife, Mrs. Price, the housekeeper, Alan Brooke, Sir Giles's secretary, and Dr. Rowley. She mentioned no guests had arrived, and the storm had rendered any external communication impossible. Poirot nodded, noting each name. He observed Clara's gestures closely, how her hands trembled slightly when she mentioned Martin, how her eyes flickered toward Diana. Small reactions, yet they spoke volumes to an observant mind. Next, Poirot spoke to Martin Fenwick. The young man appeared restless, pacing the corridors as he spoke. I don't know why my uncle should be afraid of anyone," he said, avoiding direct eye contact. "Yes, there have been disagreements, about money, about the will, but I never thought this. He always had a strong constitution." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Discrepancies between words and body language were often the first threads leading to the unraveling of a puzzle. Martin's avoidance, subtle though it was, hinted at knowledge he had yet to share. Diana Fenwick, seated calmly by the window, seemed almost too serene. Poirot observed her hands, her posture, the way she followed the passing clouds with her gaze rather than looking directly at him. "Madam," he asked gently, "were you aware of any tension within the household? Any fears that Sir Giles expressed to you privately?" Diana's reply was precise, almost rehearsed. Sir Giles was concerned, yes, but his fears were of shadows, of imagined grievances. "I did not take them seriously." Poirot filed the answer meticulously in his mental notebook. Calmness, he knew, could mask both confidence and cunning. Then came Mrs. Price, the housekeeper, a formidable woman of unwavering posture and sharp eyes. She did not attempt to hide her suspicion of the household itself. "Sir Giles was worried about theft, sir. Money missing from ledgers, signatures that did not match, things like that. And yet, he never confronted anyone. Foolishness, if you ask me." Poirot acknowledged her with a small nod. "Very well, Mrs. Price. But let us speak of the night itself. Did you observe anything unusual?" Her answer was curt: the storm. The wind. And a cry from the east wing. That is all. I went to see, and there he was, slumped at his desk. Nothing more. Finally, Poirot questioned Alan Brooke, the secretary, who looked pale and anxious, as though he had already borne witness to a dozen confessions in his mind but dared not speak. I was organizing Sir Giles's papers," he said. "I heard nothing unusual until the scream. I am afraid I cannot be of help." Poirot's eyes, sharp and probing, rested on him. "Mon ami, sometimes fear itself clouds the truth. Tell me, did Sir Giles ever speak to you about the documents in his study? Any threats, any strange occurrences?" Alan hesitated, glancing nervously toward Diana. He mentioned that something had gone missing from the safe. But I do not know what." "Anne?" "I did not touch anything." Poirot allowed the hesitation to hang in the air. It was a clue, though small, like a fragment of a larger puzzle. Having completed the initial round of questioning, Poirot returned to the study alone. The storm's residue still clung to the room, the faint smell of wet wood, the lingering scent of pipe tobacco, and, curiously, a subtle almond aroma that he could not immediately place. He crouched by the fireplace, examining the half-burned note from the night before. Only one word remained legible: betrayal. Ah, he thought, betrayal, yes, mon Dieu, but by whom? And for what reason? Poirot's mind was a machine of logic running through possibilities. Was it greed? Revenge? Or a darker impulse? One masked by civility and storm-soaked nights? He noted the placement of the paperweight, slightly askew, as though someone had dropped it in haste. He observed the position of the desk and the chair, both slightly out of alignment with normal use. Everything, even the smallest detail, spoke volumes to those who knew how to see. By mid-morning, the household gathered once more in the drawing-room. Poirot, now armed with careful observations and subtle inconsistencies, addressed them gently. Miss Amos, this night was not a simple accident. There are signs, hints, and whispers left behind. We must consider each piece carefully. Truth, as always, lies in the details. The household listened in uneasy silence, their fear palpable. Even the doctor, Edward Rowley, seemed subdued, as if realizing that Poirot's scrutiny could pierce the calm facade of propriety that each of them maintained. Poirot's gaze moved from one face to the next. Clara's pale hands, Martin's restless movements, Diana's poised serenity, Mrs. Price's taut jaw, and Alan Brooke's trembling lips, all were pieces in a complex puzzle. And Poirot, as always, was patient. He understood that one moment, one subtle slip, could unravel the entire web of deception. As the day wore on, the storm's echoes faded, leaving a cold, wet light filtering through the windows. Yet within the walls of Wetherby Grange, a deeper storm was taking shape, a storm of suspicion, fear, and hidden motives. And Poirot, with his meticulous methods, sharp observation, and keen understanding of the human psyche, would be the eye through which clarity emerged. But he did not yet know who among them had struck, or why. For now, the study remained a room of questions, the household a collection of secrets, and the scent of almonds a silent, elusive clue that only the sharpest of minds could follow. Patience, Poirot whispered, moustaches twitching. The truth reveals itself in its own time. And when it does, we will see the hand that guided it. Chapter 3, Shadows and Eavesdropping. The morning after Sir Giles Wetherby's death was a damp, grey affair. Mist clung to the estate's rolling lawns, and the heavy air smelled faintly of wet earth and old stone. Inside Wetherby Grange, the household moved with a restrained tension that made every footstep echo unnaturally loud. Poirot, true to his meticulous nature, began the day by inspecting the east wing where Sir Giles had been found, retracing the movements of the previous night with precise attention. The study was cold, the faint smoke of the half-burned note lingering in the air. Poirot crouched near the fireplace, noting subtle scuff marks on the floorboards. They suggested someone had been standing just out of sight of the desk, waiting, listening, or observing. His sharp eyes traveled to the window latch, noting it had been slightly forced. Yet, there was no evidence of entry from the outside. No footprints in the wet earth below, no dislodged stones. This was the work of someone already inside the house. Poirot straightened, moustaches twitching. Ah, mon Dieu, the murderer is clever, but not clever enough. He decided to continue questioning, but in a different manner. Poirot believed in observing interactions as much as interrogating words. He spent the morning moving silently through corridors, listening, watching, noting the nuances of behavior. In the gallery outside the drawing room, he overheard voices behind a closed door. Curious, he pressed his ear to the panel and caught fragments of speech. "Leave it alone, Diana, before everything unravels," said a sharp, low voice. "I am already in too deep," came a bitter reply. Poirot's sharp mind catalogued the voices, Martin and Diana, no doubt. The argument ended abruptly. When he later spoke to Diana, her calm composure contrasted sharply with the heated tones he had heard, and Martin avoided direct eye contact, his hands twitching slightly. This was the first thread of deception, subtle yet telling. Poirot then visited Alan Brooke in the library. The young secretary sat stiffly at a desk, his hands shaking as he sorted papers. Poirot observed him silently for several moments before speaking. "Mon ami, may I inquire about your activities during last evening?" Poirot asked softly. Alan's eyes flicked nervously toward the window. I was organizing Sir Giles's documents. I heard nothing unusual until the scream." Poirot allowed a brief pause. Timing, he knew, was crucial. A confession, even unintentional, often slipped in moments of hesitation. "And the safe, monsieur?" Poirot inquired, his eyes sweeping the room. "Was it intact?" Alan hesitated, swallowing nervously. "Most of the contents, yes, but a folder was missing. I do not know who took it. I did not touch it." Poirot noted this detail carefully. The missing folder could be a motive or a red herring. Either way, it was significant. Afterward, Poirot visited Mrs. Price, the formidable housekeeper. She was arranging silver in the dining room, her movements sharp, precise, almost mechanical. "Mrs. Price, did you observe anything unusual last night?" Poirot asked. She pursed her lips, eyebrows drawn. "The storm made everything difficult, sir. I heard a scream, yes, and when I reached the study, there he was, slumped over his desk. Nothing else." Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "You suspected someone, non?" Mrs. Price's eyes narrowed. "I suspect many, monsieur. But suspicion alone does not make guilt." Poirot smiled faintly, knowing she had unwittingly confirmed his theory. Fear, observation, and silence often protected the guilty as well as the innocent. By midday, Poirot returned to Sir Giles's study alone, moving through the room as if reconstructing invisible movements. He noticed the position of the desk, the slight tilt of the chair, and the placement of objects on the floor. Then he found a faint but unmistakable clue, a delicate smudge on the corner of the desk drawer, barely perceptible against the polished wood. He sniffed carefully. There it was again, a faint, sweet smell of almonds. "Ah, prussic acid," he murmured. His mind raced. The death, he realized, was no natural collapse. The doctor had assumed a stroke, yet Poirot's observations told a different story. Someone had used poison, carefully, deliberately. Poirot took a deep breath and turned his attention to the missing folder. It had been removed deliberately, most likely to conceal information. But who had the motive and opportunity? Almost anyone. He considered each household member in turn. Martin Fenwick, restless, secretive, with hints of anger and jealousy. Diana Fenwick, calm, poised, but overheard arguing with her husband. Clara Fenwick, gentle, emotional, yet close to the inheritance. Mrs. Price, suspicious, observant, but bound by loyalty and duty. Alan Brooke, nervous, vulnerable, with access to documents. Dr. Rowley, cheerful, yet conveniently in the house during the event. Poirot knew it was a complex web, and untangling it would require precision. Later in the afternoon, Poirot ventured to the east wing once more. He noticed a small detail overlooked by the others, the brass paperweight on the floor, slightly discolored by the damp air. Its position suggested it had been dropped in a struggle, or perhaps in a deliberate attempt to stage the scene. Poirot's eyes lingered on the half-burned note in the fireplace. Only the word betrayal remained legible. The rest, destroyed by flames, hid a secret intended to remain unseen. Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, mon Dieu, sometimes the guilty reveal themselves in what they destroy, not what they preserve." Returning to the drawing room, Poirot observed the household in their natural state. Clara sat quietly, wringing her hands, glances darting toward Martin. Diana appeared poised, but her lips were compressed, and her eyes followed Alan Brooke as he moved. Martin's restlessness was almost tangible, his fists clenching unconsciously. Mrs. Price watched silently, a hawk amidst frightened doves. And Alan Brooke, though pale and shaken, displayed a careful avoidance of direct eye contact. Poirot's mind worked with the precision of a watchmaker. He catalogued gestures, facial expressions, and pauses in speech. He began to perceive patterns, proximity, avoidance, repetition. He understood that crime was rarely the act of a single moment, it was the culmination of desire, fear, and opportunity. By evening, the storm's echo had faded completely, leaving only a damp, muted twilight across the Grange. Poirot requested that all members of the household retire to their respective rooms, ostensibly for rest. Yet he remained in the drawing-room, reflecting on the day's observations. The poison, the missing documents, the half-burned note, he mused. Each element a piece of a larger puzzle. Patience, Poirot, patience. The truth is like a shadow in the fog, elusive, yes, but unmistakable once revealed. As night fell, Poirot retired to his guest room. From the window, he could see the wet lawns glistening faintly, the silhouette of the Grange looming like a silent sentinel. His mind traced the movements of the household, replayed conversations, and reconstructed the night of Sir Giles's death. He knew that before the end of the investigation, someone would slip, reveal the tiniest inconsistency, or leave a detail overlooked. And Poirot would be ready. For in every household, under every mask of civility, there lay a secret waiting to be revealed. And at Wetherby Grange, the storm outside was only a reflection of the tempest of human emotion, fear, and deceit that had already begun to rage within. Patience. Poirot whispered to his reflection in the window pane. And the truth will speak. Mais, mon Dieu, it will speak loudly, and with certainty. Chapter 4, The Will and the Whisper. The morning air at Wetherby Grange was colder now, the storm having left a damp chill that seeped even into the thick walls of the manor. Hercule Poirot sat at the breakfast table, his posture as straight and precise as always, observing the household through his small, dark eyes. The previous day's inquiries had yielded many details, yet the puzzle remained incomplete. The subtle tension in the household, the nervous glances, the hushed arguments, all suggested motives, but nothing conclusive. Poirot knew that understanding human nature was as crucial as examining fingerprints or footprints. Clara Fenwick approached him cautiously, holding a small envelope. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I have something you should see. It is my uncle's will." Poirot's eyes lit with interest. "Ah, the law, mademoiselle, the written testament of human intention. Let us see." Clara carefully handed him the envelope. Poirot unfolded the papers with deliberate care, his eye scanning the lines of elegant script. He read aloud softly to himself, noting every detail. Then he looked up, his expression composed yet intense. "Indeed," he said, "this is significant. Sir Giles changed his will just 2 weeks ago. Previously, the majority of his estate would have passed to his cousin, Martin. Now, the principal beneficiary is you, Mademoiselle Fenwick." Clara's hands trembled. "I did not ask for it, Monsieur Poirot. My uncle said he trusted me above all. But if the others, they may resent me. Could this be the cause of what happened?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. The shift in inheritance explained much. It revealed potential motive for jealousy, fear, and resentment within the household. It also explained certain tensions he had observed, the furtive glances, the hushed arguments, the restlessness of Martin and the measured composure of Diana. After breakfast, Poirot requested to examine the rooms more closely. He began with Sir Giles's study, retracing every movement, examining the desk, the papers, and the small details that might have been overlooked. The half-burned note, with only the word betrayal visible, still lay in the fireplace's ash. Poirot studied it carefully, noting the burn pattern. Only a fragment remained, clearly a deliberate attempt to conceal a message. Poirot's eyes moved to the brass paperweight on the floor. He had observed it the previous day, but now he scrutinized it in relation to the furniture and floor scuff marks. It had been moved, possibly dropped or displaced during a struggle, or perhaps intentionally, to create confusion. Every object in the room told a story, he knew, and every action carried meaning, however subtle. Later, he spoke privately with Mrs. Price, the housekeeper. Her sharp eyes and unwavering posture had already suggested both loyalty and keen observation. Mrs. Price, Poirot began, "Tell me, did Sir Giles speak of anyone he feared within the house? Did he ever mention theft or betrayal?" The housekeeper's eyes narrowed. He was worried, yes, about money, signatures, documents. He suspected someone in the house. But he trusted no one enough to confront them directly. "And I? I did what I could to keep order." Poirot nodded. "And the others? Did you see anything suspicious last night?" Mrs. Price hesitated. "I saw Martin pacing. Diana," she whispered with him. Alan Brooke was nervous, as always. But none of them touched Sir Giles. At least, not that I could see. Poirot's mind worked rapidly. Each observation was a piece of a complex puzzle. The movements, the whispers, the tension, every detail might conceal a clue to motive and opportunity. He then requested to speak with Martin and Diana together. The couple entered the drawing room, their expressions carefully controlled. Poirot studied their interactions, how Martin avoided Diana's eyes, how Diana's hands rested lightly on the back of a chair, as if restraining herself. "Martin," Poirot began, "how did you feel when your uncle changed the will?" Martin's hands clenched at the table edge. I was surprised. But my uncle had the right to do as he pleased. I never wished him harm. He was family." Poirot noted the hesitation. "And Diana, did this change affect you?" Diana's response was calm, almost too calm. "Of course, we were disappointed. But disappointment does not equate to malice." Yet Poirot noticed the tension in Diana's jaw, the slight twitch of her left hand, and the way her eyes followed Alan Brooke as he passed in the corridor. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but telling. Later, while examining Sir Giles's bedroom, Poirot found something that intrigued him, a scrap of paper tucked inside a drawer, almost invisible. It bore a cryptic message. "Two faces hide behind the smile. Watch the one who stands too close." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Ah, very interesting, yes. The human heart, when it fears exposure, often speaks in riddles, even in notes." He filed this piece of evidence in his mind. It suggested someone was aware of duplicity within the household, a warning, a clue, or perhaps a veiled threat. Poirot also revisited the placement of objects in the study and bedroom. He noted the small scuff marks near the desk, the misaligned chair, and, most curiously, the faint almond scent that lingered in the corners of the room. "Poison, prussic acid," he murmured softly. "This explains the sudden collapse, the apparent natural death. Clever, yes, but it leaves a trace." By late afternoon, Poirot had observed subtle patterns in behavior. Clara remained nervous yet sincere, genuinely shocked by her uncle's death. Martin was restless, bitter, and guarded. Diana maintained a controlled composure, but with flashes of tension. Mrs. Price remained watchful and silent, while Alan Brooke's nervousness bordered on fear. Even Dr. Rowley, the cheerful physician, displayed subtle signs of discomfort when questioned indirectly about the events. Poirot paused to consider the combination of motives and opportunity. The sudden change in the will provided a powerful incentive. The missing folder and the half-burned note suggested someone had acted to conceal documents or messages. The poison indicated premeditation. And yet, Poirot sensed a deeper layer, a psychological element not immediately visible in the surface details. The interactions, the proximity of certain individuals, the whispered arguments, all pointed to personal grievances, secrets, and perhaps a tangled web of alliances. In the evening, Poirot requested that all household members gather in the drawing room. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across faces tense with unease. Poirot moved deliberately, addressing them all. "Miss Amos," he began, "yesterday's events were not random. There are motives here, hidden desires, and acts of careful calculation. But I must ask each of you, watch your own words, your gestures, your closeness to others. One small slip, one fleeting moment, may reveal much. The truth does not lie in grand declarations, but in subtle signs." A hush fell over the room. Clara's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Martin shifted nervously. Diana's eyes, calm and poised, nevertheless betrayed a flicker of unease. Alan Brooke swallowed audibly. Mrs. Price, ever watchful, said nothing, but her gaze was sharp, almost predatory. Poirot allowed the silence to settle, confident that the seeds of revelation had been planted. He returned to his guest room that night, reflecting on the day's events, retracing conversations, gestures, and movements in his mind. Each small detail, each whispered exchange, each shadow of suspicion could lead to the truth, or to misdirection. The Grange was a house of secrets, and Poirot, with his unmatched attention to detail and understanding of human psychology, would unravel them all. But he knew patience was essential. The smallest error, the slightest oversight, could reveal the hand behind the crime. And he intended to watch, wait, and listen until the truth emerged in its own time. "Yes, mon Dieu," Poirot whispered to himself, moustaches twitching. "The threads of this web are many. But soon, they will converge, and the truth will speak, clear and undeniable." Chapter 5, a second game begins. The day following his discovery of Sir Giles Wetherby's death dawned in a brittle, cold light. The storm had passed entirely, leaving a washed and damp landscape, and a thick fog lingered across the lawns and the surrounding woodlands. Within Wetherby Grange, however, the storm's aftershocks persisted. Anxiety hung in every corridor, suspicion lingered in every glance, and the household moved like a tightly wound clockwork mechanism on the verge of snapping. Hercule Poirot, master of observation and deduction, knew that tensions often revealed more than words could ever convey. By mid-morning, Poirot had finished revisiting Sir Giles's study and tracing again the subtle marks he had noted, the scuffs near the desk, the slightly forced window latch, and, most intriguingly, the lingering scent of almonds that hung faintly in the corners. The poison, prussic acid, was subtle, clever, and deliberate, and it left behind that telltale aroma. Someone in the household had acted with premeditation. But who? And why? Poirot decided to spend the morning observing the interactions among the residents more closely. Clara Fenwick moved quietly between rooms, her pale hands twisting the hem of her sleeve nervously. Martin Fenwick's restlessness had increased. He paced along corridors, muttering under his breath, and cast nervous glances at both his wife and his cousin. Diana Fenwick's serenity remained carefully constructed, though Poirot noted the faint tension around her eyes and the deliberate way she maintained distance from the others. Alan Brooke, the secretary, appeared increasingly pale, avoiding eye contact, while Mrs. Price moved silently, observing without comment, as she always did. As Poirot walked down the long east corridor toward the library, he heard a faint, almost imperceptible noise, a soft gurgling cough from the direction of the drawing room. Concerned, he entered to find Clara slumped over a chair, her face pale, lips trembling, and a small cup of tea overturned on the carpet beside her. "Mademoiselle!" Poirot exclaimed, hurrying to her side. He lifted her gently, observing the faint flush on her cheeks and the rapid, shallow rhythm of her breathing. Ah! Mon Dieu, what has happened? Clara's eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. I don't know. I felt dizzy, and then I could not breathe properly, she whispered, her voice trembling. Poirot's gaze immediately shifted to the overturned teacup, noting the faint residue at its edges. He bent closer and inhaled subtly. The sweet scent of almonds filled his senses. Yes, prussic acid, he murmured softly. An attempt, but less potent than that of last night. Someone wanted to frighten, perhaps, or test the outcome. Dr. Rowley, who had arrived quickly at Poirot's summons, examined Clara with a professional air. It was a mild dose, he said, though even his voice contained a hint of concern. She will recover with rest and warmth, but it could have been far worse. Poirot nodded silently, his sharp mind already racing. Whoever had administered the poison had done so with knowledge of its potency and careful timing. The cup, the tea, the opportunity, all suggested a deliberate act, and one that required access to both the household and the victim's habits. After ensuring Clara was settled, Poirot turned his attention to the rest of the household. He asked gently, but pointedly, about their whereabouts at the time of the incident. Each provided an account, but subtle inconsistencies immediately caught his attention. Martin, he noticed, had wandered near the corridor outside the drawing room, though he claimed he had been in the library. Diana's explanation for her absence, she had been arranging flowers, was technically plausible, yet Poirot detected a subtle tension in her voice, a hesitation that betrayed more than words alone. Alan Brooke, nervous as ever, admitted he had entered the pantry to fetch sugar for tea but claimed to have returned immediately. Mrs. Price, ever precise, claimed to have been supervising the servants in the kitchen. Poirot filed each account with meticulous care, noting both the details and the tone, aware that inconsistencies could be revealed not just in words but in gestures, in timing, in the slightest hesitation. Poirot spent the afternoon retracing the movements around the drawing room and kitchen, examining doors, handles, and possible access points. He observed where Clara had been seated, the exact angle of the tea table, and the subtle smudges on the tray. The placement of objects, he realized, suggested deliberate planning. Someone had watched the household routines and chosen the moment with precision. As the afternoon wore on, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the anxious faces. Clara, though recovering, remained pale and seated near the hearth. Poirot, pacing slowly, allowed his gaze to sweep across the group, noting their reactions. "Miss Amos," he began, "we have witnessed a second, deliberate act last hour. An attempt was made on Mademoiselle Fenwick's life. The method is consistent with that used against Sir Giles, prussic acid, administered with knowledge and care. This was no accident. Someone seeks to manipulate, to intimidate, or to eliminate obstacles in a careful plan. The question, of course, is who?" The room fell silent. Martin shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward Diana. Diana's lips pressed together, her hands resting lightly on her lap, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Alan Brooke's hands trembled ever so slightly. Mrs. Price remained composed, though her sharp gaze did not waver from Poirot. Poirot continued, speaking softly but firmly, his words precise and deliberate. "Observe, Miss Amos, the smallest details reveal the truth. The location of objects, the timing of movements, the hesitation in speech, each is a clue. Do not underestimate them." He walked slowly toward Clara, lifting the small, overturned cup. "Notice the residue here, the faint almond scent. The poison is subtle, yet detectable. It is not impulsive. It requires planning, foresight, and knowledge of the household's routines. The person responsible had access and opportunity, and they are among us now." Poirot's gaze swept the room once more, lingering briefly on each face. He allowed the weight of his words to settle. Then, with deliberate care, he concluded. This second act changes everything. We are not dealing with an accident, nor with mere misfortune. We are dealing with a deliberate, cunning individual who will act again if unchecked. Therefore, vigilance is required. Each of you must be observed, each action noted, and each word remembered. The truth will reveal itself in due time, but the first task is to ensure the safety of those who may yet be endangered. The household remained silent, a tense mixture of fear, guilt, and apprehension filling the room. Clara, recovering but still pale, looked at Poirot with a mixture of hope and desperation. Martin's restlessness increased. Diana's controlled composure seemed almost brittle. Alan Brooke's nervousness bordered on panic. And Mrs. Price's watchful eyes did not waver for an instant. Later that evening, Poirot retired to his room, reflecting on the day's events. The attempted poisoning had escalated the situation from suspicion to imminent danger. Whoever had killed Sir Giles and sought to harm Clara was patient, calculating, and cunning. Each member of the household, Poirot realized, harbored secrets, grievances, or vulnerabilities. The murderer had acted with knowledge of their routines and the subtle psychology of fear. Poirot's moustaches twitched with anticipation. He knew the next steps must be careful, deliberate, and precise. Observation, patience, and attention to detail would reveal the hidden truths. And when the time came, the threads of motive, opportunity, and human nature would converge in a revelation that would leave no doubt. For now, the game had changed. The danger was no longer hypothetical. It was real, immediate, and close. And Poirot, as always, was ready to watch, wait, and discern the truth hidden within the shadows of Wetherby Grange. Yes, mon Dieu, he whispered, fingers steepled. The threads are tightening. Soon, the truth will speak. Chapter 6, Secrets Beneath the Surface. The morning after the attempted poisoning, Wetherby Grange felt charged with a new kind of tension. The storm had long since passed, leaving a pallid, mist-laden sunlight that cast ghostly shadows through the tall windows. The household moved like automata, each person burdened with unspoken suspicion and fear. Even the servants, normally efficient and unflappable under Mrs. Price's strict supervision, seemed subdued, whispering softly in corners, their eyes flicking toward the drawing-room or the east wing where tragedy had struck twice. Hercule Poirot, calm as ever, observed all of it with the meticulous patience of a master conductor surveying an orchestra. He had spent the night reviewing notes, tracing the faint scent of almonds through corridors, and replaying conversations in his mind. Each gesture, each hesitation, each glance held significance. The household was a chessboard, and the murderer, hidden among them, was moving pieces with deliberate care. Poirot began his day with a quiet inspection of Sir Giles's documents once more. The missing folder, absent from the safe and yet vital to the understanding of the household's undercurrents, occupied his thoughts. What had it contained? Financial records? Letters? Perhaps evidence of secret relationships? Poirot could feel that the answer lay within the mundane, in the subtleties overlooked by others. His attention shifted to Clara Fenwick, who had returned to the drawing-room, pale but determined. She had insisted upon helping Poirot with the arrangements of Sir Giles's papers, hoping perhaps to reclaim some sense of control. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I cannot help but feel, there is more here than just the will. Something my uncle discovered, something that made him afraid. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, mademoiselle, you perceive the nuance. Fear is a language, subtle yet revealing. The human heart speaks through hesitation, through avoidance, through obsession. Your uncle, he knew something. And that knowledge cost him dearly. After observing Clara, Poirot requested to speak privately with Martin and Diana. The couple had been distant since the attempted poisoning, their composure strained. Poirot watched Martin pacing, glancing at his wife with a mixture of irritation and unease. Diana, poised as always, maintained her composure, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, fear, perhaps, or a desire to conceal. "Martin," Poirot began, his tone soft yet precise, "yesterday's events have changed everything. Tell me, have there been tensions beyond money and inheritance? Threats? Warnings?" Martin hesitated, then shook his head. "Not directly. But there have been letters, strange letters, anonymous notes. Nothing specific. Just hints that someone knew what we were doing, or watching us." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Anonymous letters, and yet your uncle was aware of some secret?" The plot thickens." "And Diana, did you receive any similar messages?" Diana's lips pressed together. "No. I never received anything." "But Martin, he seemed troubled by them." "I assumed they were nothing." Poirot made a note in his mind. The existence of anonymous messages suggested blackmail or knowledge of hidden affairs. Someone was manipulating, threatening, and testing the household's nerves. He also considered the timing. The death of Sir Giles, followed by the attempted poisoning of Clara, was too precise to be random. Later in the day, Poirot requested a private meeting with Mrs. Price. The housekeeper's sharp eyes met his own, calculating, precise, unwavering. "Mrs. Price," Poirot began, "you have been with this family for many years. Tell me, have you noticed unusual behavior recently? Secrets kept too carefully? Servants behaving oddly?" Mrs. Price's hands folded neatly in front of her. "I have seen shadows, Monsieur Poirot. Words whispered behind closed doors. Things moved at night that shouldn't have been moved. But who among them is guilty, that I cannot say." Poirot nodded. "Sometimes, it is not guilt alone that exposes a person, but fear of exposure. Observe, listen, and the truth will reveal itself in the smallest gestures." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot examined the library and corridors once more. His eyes caught something subtle, a faint smudge on the edge of the bookshelf near where Clara had been seated during breakfast, almost invisible to the casual observer. He inhaled slightly, and the almond scent, faint, almost imperceptible, confirmed his suspicions. Whoever had administered the poison had been careful, yes, but not perfect. Every human act leaves a trace. Poirot then requested the household to assemble in the drawing room, citing a matter of importance. When everyone was present, he began speaking in his calm, deliberate tone, pacing slowly, fingers steepled. "Miss Amos," he began, "yesterday we saw a second act. An attempt upon Mademoiselle Fenwick. The method was the same as that which took Sir Giles. The purpose is clear, to frighten, to eliminate, to manipulate. Yet there is more, something hidden beneath the surface, something we have overlooked." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Each person shifted slightly, their attention drawn irresistibly toward him. Poirot's gaze lingered on Martin and Diana. He could see the flicker of unease in their eyes. Alan Brooke trembled subtly in his chair. Clara's hands rested nervously in her lap. Mrs. Price's watchfulness remained unwavering, almost imperious. Poirot continued. "There are motives beyond money and inheritance. Letters, notes, threats, someone is manipulating fear, using knowledge, testing reactions. Blackmail, Miss Amos. And blackmail is a dangerous game, for the one who wields it often becomes ensnared in their own web." He moved toward the hearth, fingers lightly tracing the edge of the fireplace. "Your uncle knew something. A secret. And someone sought to suppress it. The missing folder, the burned note, the almond scent in the air, they are all signs. This is not a crime of passion. This is calculated, deliberate, and precise. Martin shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot's eyes locked with his. Ah, but you do, n'est-ce pas? The truth has a way of making itself known, often through the smallest details. Every gesture, every hesitation, every glance carries meaning. And soon, Miss Amos, soon, the web will unravel, and the guilty hand will be revealed. The household remained silent. Even the normally cheerful Dr. Rowley seemed subdued, a shadow of tension in his posture. Clara's eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and hope, while Diana's calm composure had become taut, brittle. Alan Brooke's pallor deepened, and Mrs. Price's eyes glimmered with a sharp, knowing focus. Later, Poirot returned to the study alone. He reviewed every observation of the past days, the scuff marks on the floor, the displaced objects, the faint almond scent, the missing folder, and the half-burned note. Each element suggested calculation, opportunity, and human psychology exploited. The murderer had acted not impulsively, but with knowledge, patience, and intent. As night fell over Wetherby Grange, the household retired to their rooms under a watchful eye. Poirot remained in the drawing-room, staring at the flickering fire, pondering the intricacies of motive, opportunity, and character. The game had escalated. The stakes were now life and death, and the web of deceit stretched further than any of them realized. Poirot's moustaches twitched with anticipation. Patience, he reminded himself. Observation, he noted. The smallest detail, the tiniest slip, would reveal the truth. And when it did, no one, no matter how careful, how cunning, could escape the justice of reason and intellect. Yes, mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, leaning forward, eyes bright with purpose. Soon, very soon, the threads will converge. And the truth will speak, clear, undeniable, and final. Chapter 7, The Trap and the Whispered Truth. The morning after Poirot's careful deductions began to take shape, Wetherby Grange was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The lingering fog hung thick over the lawns, muffling the sound of footsteps, and the manor seemed to hold its breath. Within, tension coiled in every corridor, and the household moved like figures under surveillance, aware that some unseen eye was tracing their actions with precision. Poirot, as ever, maintained his calm exterior, though his mind was a storm of reasoning. Every detail observed in the last days, the scuff marks, the almond scent, the half-burned note, and the missing folder, had been carefully catalogued. Now, it was time to act strategically, to create circumstances that might provoke the truth into revealing itself. He called the household together for breakfast in the drawing-room. Clara, recovering from the mild poisoning, sat near the fire, still pale but attentive. Martin and Diana occupied their usual chairs, their composure strained but intact. Alan Brooke avoided eye contact entirely, hands trembling slightly, and Mrs. Price, ever watchful, observed with a cool, calculating expression. Even Dr. Rowley, cheerful as he usually was, seemed subdued, as if sensing the tension that Poirot had engineered. Miss Amos, Poirot began, his voice soft yet deliberate, we are nearing the solution to these troubling events. Yesterday, we saw an attempt on Mademoiselle Fenwick's life. And before that, the death of Sir Giles. The method, the intent, the opportunity, all point toward one who is calculating, clever, and careful. He paused, letting his words sink in, his sharp eyes sweeping across the room. Each person adjusted slightly, their reactions revealing more than words could express. Today, Poirot continued, we shall take a small step toward truth. I ask that each of you move only as required, and that no one handle certain documents without my supervision. A test, Miss Amos, to observe reactions, to provoke slips, and to measure fear. The guilty often reveal themselves by impatience, by subtle gestures, by the attempt to conceal knowledge that cannot remain hidden. Poirot had devised a plan. he instructed that the household gather in the study, under the pretense of reviewing Sir Giles's documents to ensure clarity of the estate. Carefully, he had replaced the missing folder, hidden from view, yet accessible, and subtly suggested that the contents would be read aloud if necessary. The strategy was simple. The murderer, fearing exposure, might act or betray themselves in the anticipation of discovery. As the household entered the study, Poirot moved deliberately among them, noting every expression. Martin's hands twitched, Diana's lips pressed tightly together, betraying tension beneath her poise. Alan Brooks shifted nervously, eyes darting, and Mrs. Price, as always, remained still, watching intently. Clara, seated near Poirot, seemed unaware of the subtle interplay of observation, a symbol of innocence threatened. Poirot opened the folder with theatrical precision. The papers within contained financial records, correspondence, and cryptic notes, elements that, when read aloud selectively, could expose knowledge of secrets the household had sought to conceal. He began by reviewing innocuous items, observing the reactions of each person. Subtle changes in posture, the flicker of an eye, the quick swallow of a gulp, all these signs were recorded meticulously in Poirot's mind. Then, carefully, Poirot mentioned a specific entry, a note in Sir Giles's handwriting referring to unauthorized movements of documents and letters. The household shifted. Martin's fingers clenched briefly on the arm of his chair. Diana's serene expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Alan Brooks' gaze dropped. Mrs. Price remained impassive, though Poirot noticed a tightening of her jaw. The question, Poirot said softly, his voice carrying calm authority, is, who among you sought to hide these movements, to manipulate fear, to create chaos? A silence fell. The fire crackled in the hearth, a low, steady background to the taut stillness of the room. Each member of the household seemed conscious of the weight of observation, aware that any gesture, any hesitation, any subtle sign could betray them. Poirot then, with deliberate calm, removed a small teacup from the shelf, one identical to the one Clara had used. He held it up, allowing a faint whiff of almonds to escape, a scent unmistakable to anyone who remembered the near-fatal incident. "Notice, Miss Amis," he said, "the residue, the scent, the method. It is subtle. It is clever. But it leaves a trace. A trace that reveals knowledge, intent, and presence." Martin shifted uncomfortably. Diana's hands rested tensely on her lap, and Alan Brooks' fingers twitched. Mrs. Price's eyes glimmered, and Poirot knew he was close. Subtlety was key. He allowed the tension to stretch, observing the reactions, cataloguing the signs that would later form the foundation of his deductions. Poirot then produced a letter, carefully folded and placed in the folder. It was a note from an anonymous source, threatening exposure unless certain instructions were followed. He read it aloud, his voice calm but deliberate. The household's reactions were instantaneous. Martin's shoulders stiffened, Diana's breath quickened, Alan Brooks' face paled, Clara's eyes widened, and Mrs. Price's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. "Ah, and now," Poirot said, leaning forward slightly, moustaches twitching, "we observe the subtle interplay of fear, deception, and opportunity. One among you has acted with knowledge, and that knowledge is betrayed not by words, but by instinct. Fear cannot be hidden completely, NSCE par." For a long moment, the room was silent. The weight of Poirot's observation pressed upon each member of the household. Then, suddenly, a small slip, a glance, a twitch of a hand, revealed the first crack in the carefully maintained facade. Poirot's eyes fixed on Diana Fenwick. She had involuntarily leaned toward the folder, as if hoping to ensure it remained hidden, a gesture too quick to be consciously controlled. Poirot's mind worked rapidly, tracing back through days of observation, noting interactions, gestures, and subtle inconsistencies. He understood now the interplay of relationships, secrets, and fears, the will, the missing folder, the half-burned note, the poison, all pieces of a complex puzzle orchestrated by a calculating hand. "Miss Amis," Poirot said quietly, his voice almost conversational. "Soon, we will understand all. The motive, the method, the opportunity, and the subtle manipulations that have created fear and suspicion in this household. But first, patience. Even the cleverest cannot escape the consequences of their own instincts." The household left the study gradually, under Poirot's watchful eye, returning to their rooms with unease gnawing at the edges of their composure. Poirot remained, pacing slowly, reviewing each detail: Martin's tension, Diana's subtle gesture, Alan Brooke's anxiety, Mrs. Price's watchfulness, Clara's innocence. The threads of deception were intertwined, but not beyond unraveling. As evening fell over Wetherby Grange, Poirot retired to his room to review the day's observations. The trap had been set. The reactions, subtle though they were, had revealed cracks in the careful facades maintained by those under scrutiny. The murderer, Poirot knew, had not yet realized how closely he or she was being observed, and the next step would force a revelation too significant to conceal. The game was almost complete. The pieces had moved themselves into place, guided subtly by human nature, and the final act approached. Poirot's moustaches twitched with anticipation. "Very soon, mon Dieu," he whispered to himself. "The threads will converge, and the truth will emerge. All that is hidden shall be revealed, and justice, calm, rational, and undeniable, will prevail." Chapter 8: The Unveiling. The morning sun broke weakly over Wetherby Grange, pale light filtering through the tall, misted windows. Inside, the household moved with an uneasy rhythm, the events of the past week weighing heavily upon everyone. Yet Hercule Poirot remained calm, his composure immaculate, his dark eyes alert and calculating. Today, he would bring the intricate web of deceit to its final unraveling. Poirot requested that all members of the household gather in the drawing room. Clara, still pale but recovered, sat near the fire. Martin Fenwick occupied a chair with his usual restless energy barely contained. Diana Fenwick's poised expression was slightly strained, as though she had sensed that the moment of revelation had arrived. Alan Brooke trembled subtly in his seat, hands clasped tightly together, and Mrs. Price, ever watchful, sat like a sentinel, her sharp eyes fixed on Poirot. Dr. Rowley, cheerful yet subdued, lingered quietly to one side. Poirot began, his voice soft, yet carrying the authority of one accustomed to commanding attention. "Miss Amos, we have been together for several days under unusual and distressing circumstances. A death, an attempted murder, and the fear that has haunted this house are not the results of chance. They are the work of a human hand, deliberate and precise, motivated by desire, fear, and calculation." He paused, surveying the room. Every movement, every subtle gesture was catalogued in his mind. Poirot knew that the murderer, despite their cunning, had already betrayed themselves in small ways: a twitch, a glance, a hesitation. These were the footprints of the human heart, visible to the discerning eye. "Let us begin at the beginning," Poirot continued. Sir Giles Wetherby's death was sudden, yet it was no natural collapse. The telltale almond scent in the study reveals the presence of prussic acid, a subtle poison. It was administered with knowledge of the household, timing, and routine. The intention was clear: to remove an obstacle and to conceal information. Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she did not speak. Poirot's gaze swept across the room and paused momentarily on Diana, noting her rigid posture, then on Martin, whose restless hands betrayed suppressed agitation. Next, the missing folder and the half-burned note, Poirot continued. "They indicate knowledge of secrets worth hiding. Documents moved, letters destroyed, evidence concealed, actions performed by one with both motive and opportunity. And the second act, the attempted poisoning of Mademoiselle Fenwick, demonstrates intent to continue manipulation and intimidation, even after the first crime." Poirot allowed a pause, letting the weight of his words sink in. He moved slowly among the gathered household, each step deliberate, measured. "So, we have motive, opportunity, an action. Yet what is the motive beyond inheritance and greed? This is where human nature comes into play. Fear, jealousy, and the desire to control outcomes often drive even the calmest among us to desperate measures. Poirot's eyes fixed firmly on Diana Fenwick. Diana, you maintain composure admirably, yet the smallest gestures betray your knowledge. The night of Sir Giles's death, you whispered with your husband, Martin, regarding letters you wished to suppress, letters revealing a long-standing secret that could have affected the family's reputation and your position within it. Diana's eyes widened slightly, but her lips remained pressed. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Yes, Diana. You feared exposure, and so you acted. The poison cup, the timing, the subtle administration of prussic acid to Sir Giles, these were not accidents. They were deliberate, calculated, and performed to silence the one who might have revealed your secret. Martin shifted in his chair, tension coiling visibly in his shoulders. Poirot turned to him. And you, Martin, were complicit in counsel, if not in action. You encouraged secrecy and participated in the manipulation of fear, though your own hesitation prevented you from direct involvement in the final act. Still, your motives, jealousy, anger, and the desire for control, were present. Clara gasped softly, but Poirot raised a hand gently to silence her. Fear, Miss Amis, does not justify action, but it explains hesitation and deception. Let us return to the evidence. The missing folder contained letters from Sir Giles concerning financial irregularities and personal secrets within the household. The half-burned note, with its single word remaining, betrayal, was written by Sir Giles, a warning to those who might exploit knowledge of these letters. Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing finally on Mrs. Price. The housekeeper remained composed, silent, a figure of loyalty and order. And you, Mrs. Price, observed all. Your loyalty to the household allowed you to notice the small details, the misplaced objects, the subtle movements, the whispers behind doors. You did not act, but your observations have been crucial in understanding the events. He paused, letting the weight of the revelation hang in the air. The second act, the attempted poisoning of Mademoiselle Fenwick, was intended to ensure silence, to intimidate, and to remove a potential obstacle. The method, identical to the first crime, was deliberate, designed to replicate the fear induced by Sir Giles's death. Diana finally spoke, her voice trembling, though she maintained her poise. It was not meant to go this far, only to prevent, to protect. Poirot nodded gently. Miss Amis, protection is a powerful motivation, but so is fear. Fear can lead the cleverest to commit acts they would not otherwise imagine. Your desire to conceal a secret, combined with jealousy and fear, drove you to attempt murder. But you underestimated the careful observation of the human spirit. He moved closer to the center of the room. And now, all evidence is reconciled. The scuff marks near the desk, the faint almond scent, the missing documents, the half-burned note, and the reactions observed during the staged reading of documents, all point to Diana Fenwick as the primary actor, with Martin Fenwick's knowledge and tacit complicity. Diana's hands clenched briefly, then relaxed. Her composure broke, and she slumped slightly. Yes, it was me. I could not allow the secrets to be revealed. I feared ruin. I acted. The poison, the letters, the notes, it was all to protect the family, and myself. Martin lowered his head, shame etched across his features. I advised, I knew, but I did not act. Poirot's moustaches twitched as he regarded them calmly. And yet, the moral weight remains. Calculation and intent, Miss Amis, determine responsibility. Diana Fenwick, you sought to manipulate fear and silence, and your actions nearly claimed 2 lives. Martin Fenwick, your complicity in knowledge and counsel carries its own burden. But justice, tempered with understanding, allows for reflection and the possibility of redemption. Poirot then turned to Clara, her face pale but relieved. Mademoiselle Fenwick, your life was endangered, yes, but your courage and composure have preserved your position and dignity. The truth has emerged, as it always does, through observation, reason, and the smallest signs of human nature. Mrs. Price, ever precise, nodded approvingly. It is as I observed, Monsieur Poirot. The guilty are revealed not by words alone, but by the subtle truths they cannot suppress. Poirot smiled faintly. Exactly, Mrs. Price. The truth is patient, persistent, and revealing. And now, the threads of deceit, fear, and secrecy are all untangled. Wetherby Grange may find peace again, though the lessons of human nature will remain. The household sat in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of Poirot's revelations. Diana's confession, Martin's complicity, and the intricate web of motives, methods, and human frailty had been laid bare with calm precision. The tragedy, the attempted crime, and the shadow of fear that had loomed over the Grange were resolved, not through anger or confrontation, but through meticulous observation, patience, and intellect. As the morning light grew brighter, casting warmth through the tall windows, Poirot rose gracefully. Miss Amos, remember this, human nature is a labyrinth of desires, fears, and secrets. The cleverest may attempt to conceal their actions, but the truth always finds a way. And when it speaks, justice, reason, and understanding prevail. With that, Poirot's eyes swept the room one final time, his moustaches twitching with quiet satisfaction. The web had been unravelled. The guilty had been revealed. And Wetherby Grange, shadowed by fear no longer, could begin to heal. Patience, observation, and the smallest details, Poirot thought, always reveal the truth. Ah, mon Dieu, it is so simple, when one observes carefully.